crosser.
Yeah, that's probably true. Okay, so number one, I haven't downloaded or uploaded, I should say, any of the last Wednesday or last Sunday yet. I'm kind of getting behind. Our air conditioner broke last week, so I had to go home, figure out what's wrong with that, and then fix it the next day. And then I started school, so I got a little bit behind on stuff, but I'm gonna get caught up hopefully Friday with that. Now, what we're into tonight, this is when we were talking in Revelation, we were talking out of chapters 8 and 9 the last couple times. And in chapters 8 and 9, there's different theories on what, number one, what's coming out of the abuso, the abyss, as well as, what these locusts, these kind of weird creatures that they're describing that come out of the ground. So there's a lot of different theories on what a lot of that stuff is. Well, when looking at, let's see, it was chapter 9, it was talking about them coming out of the great abyss, and it was talking about locusts coming out of there, and you kind of get the impression really quickly that these aren't just locusts. It's describing their features. They've got crowns of gold on their head that kind of represents authority and kind of conquering. They've got features like a man, so it represents some form of intelligence and kind of capabilities that way. But then it's also got other characteristics on that. So what we talked about was how it was possible that the Nephilim, as it says, could play a role in that. Well, I said I would do a lesson on it if it was requested, but it was requested, so we're going to talk about the Nephilim tonight, and out of Genesis 6, and we kind of already covered this. Matt, you might be bored tonight. We went over this not too long ago, but we'll go over it again. And this will be on video now too, because like I said, Betty and Matt were the only ones here that night. But, you kind of think, well, why does this really play that important of a role? Overall, it probably doesn't play that big of a role in your view on a lot of things. However, you could argue, speaking more like in the latter days kind of stuff, that it's important to understand what exactly happened. And I'll kind of get into that a little bit more as we go along. But Genesis chapter 6 is where I'll start out at. It says, "And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord God said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. And there were giants in the earth," that's where we get the term Nephilim. "There were giants in the earth those days." It says, actually in Josephus, it says, it might say Nephilim, and then it says, the Greeks called them gigantes, or giants, is what it says, I think, in Josephus. They were giants in the earth in those days, and also after, when the sons of God came unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And repented the Lord that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man, and it says perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. There's some weird things that are described there. There's three main views. One of them I'm not even going to get into because it doesn't have a place whatsoever. Honestly, it's just kind of a joke, in my opinion. And it's not really believed by too many people anyway. It was just sort of kind of like, when you read into this and you look at different opinions on it, it's more like oh, by the way, some people have suggested this. What it asserts is that when it says the sons of God, that it says that basically you had one place, I think in Exodus, where it talks about like what you would consider more royal, I guess, more affluent, kind of richer, what we would consider. They describe them as like lords or sons of lords or something like that. I can't remember what it was exactly. I meant to look it up, but my notes on that were in another notebook and I didn't grab it. But it's not the same wording used. They kind of say, oh, well, they're similar in nature, so it has to be kind of the same. But it's not. It's using different language. The other view on it is called the Sethite view. Now, the Sethite view asserts that when it says that the sons of God chose the daughters of men, that what it says is that it says the godly line of Seth, because Seth was the blessed line after Canaan had murdered Abel. It was saying that the godly sons of Seth went down and married the ungodly line of Cain. Problem with that is there's not a single passage in the Bible where it says sons of God to refer to men. It doesn't exist. It's not used to describe people. Now, there is one other place where we can read about this, and let's see, Job. We'll go to Job real quick. Job 2:4. Job chapter 1. Verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God, it uses the same exact phrase, and I'm not just talking about here in the English, I'm talking about in the original Hebrew as well. It uses the same exact phrase. There was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down. So we know that. And there's other places I could use to describe that as well. That's just kind of a quick reference where angels are described as sons of God. And there's also plenty of other scriptures I could point out where like Jesus himself was referred to as the Son of Man, and that was sort of to appeal to his aspect of being the son of Adam. Now, there's also places where we see the daughters of men in the Bible as well, and you know, I tend to take this a little more literal than what some other people would say. That I subscribe to what's called the angel view. That angels came down and they decided to mingle with the daughters of men. If you look at the Sethite view and you figure out around where that started to kind of come into commentary, you can't really find that till you get to like around Augustine, around 3rd, 4th century, sometime in there. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. I remember, like I said, I had a lot of this written in my notebook the last time, but I didn't have. I grabbed the wrong notebook, and it's in my other old one. So. That's the Sethite view. Now, I just read the sons of God referring to angels in Job chapter 1. I also want you to turn to 2 Peter in the 2nd chapter. Now, 2 Peter in the 2nd chapter, there's a very interesting thing here, and I've gone over this a couple times, just not maybe as deep into it. 2 Peter, the 2nd chapter. So Peter starts to talk about the last days. He says, but there were false prophets also among them. He kind of describes what you would see in the last days. There was false prophets also among them, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction. And many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. And through covetousness shall they with vain words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to It says hell. There's something different about this word. If you read different translation, it says hell in the King James. Does anybody else have a different Bible that says something different?
No, what verse was you on?
That is, I'm sorry, that is 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. Okay.
2, 4.
Tartarus. I brought this up last week. I don't know if you remember or not. I brought it up last week. I think I brought it up the week before. But it actually says Tartarus. It is the only place in the Bible that this exists. This word was not used anywhere else to describe hell. So you kind of think to yourself, well, that's weird. Why did they use this word to describe hell, but everywhere else they use Gehenna? What's going on here?
What's Tartarus supposed to mean? They have hell here.
Yeah,
and then they showed Tartarus in the reference.
Yeah, it's different. So remember that this is written in Greek. Okay? So with it being written in Greek, they use Greek words to describe, you know, what this actually means. So in order to translate this word, they actually had to read, you know, books like stuff that Homer had written and other Greek works to figure out what Tartarus even meant, because Gehenna was used in Greek mythology to kind of describe hell, but then there was Tartarus. I read this, let me see. So Tartarus, if you look up what Tartarus actually means.
What's the Septuagint mean?
Septuagint?
Yes.
I'm not sure what the actual word means. It's.
I mean, what does it say about?
The Septuagint is only the Old Testament.
Oh, okay.
Because it was translated, the Septuagint was translated because what you had, you know, after the Babylonian exile, over that course of, 500 years between there and Jesus, what you had was more and more Jews kind of stopped speaking Hebrew. Especially in other areas, like kind of that weren't specifically in Jerusalem or in that area, they stopped speaking Hebrew. So in order to keep them fluent and keep them in the Bible, they translated it, the Old Testament, into Greek. Now, when we have the New Testament, it was already written into Greek originally. So yeah, there's no Septuagint for the New Testament, only the Old Testament. It was written, I think, and I could be wrong, I think it was written somewhere around like 150 to 300 BC. It was somewhere in there. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up.
I know. I heard somebody say the other day where they thought that was the most accurate to go by, Septuagint.
It is
the most accurate to explain verses.
It is in some ways, because they translated it back then and it survived wholly. So in an aspect, it does kind of give you a better understanding of maybe how they saw it. Yeah. Which there are plenty of verses that I get out of there if I think that it shows something a little bit more clear. Or like the other day when I read from the Septuagint, out of Amos 7:1, it reads completely and totally different from the King James, where it talks about King Gog in the Septuagint, and it doesn't even say anything anywhere close to that in the King James. So, and it really doesn't even say anything that close to that if you look at that in the Hebrew, direct translation from the Old Hebrew to directly English. So it is interesting to look at in comparison, because sometimes it's kind of right along the lines, or it shows it better, but sometimes it's drastically different, and you're like, man, that's so in Greek mythology, Tartarus is the deep abyss that is used as a dungeon of torment and suffering for the wicked, as the prison for the Titans. So it's actually viewed kind of below hell, is kind of its thought. That I think it was, which one described it? They described as many meters as basically the heavens are from the earth. That's how far Tartarus is from hell. So that's kind of one way to look at it, of how the Greeks viewed it in their mythology. Okay, because again, that's the only reason why we even know what this word means, is because we could read Greek texts and they kind of showed us what this word meant. Now, there's like one instance of, there was a video I had watched where a lady was kind of trying to talked to, she used, what's the word? I can't remember what the word is, where it's only used in the Bible in one place, and you don't know what it means if you just read it. Because there's other places where you can kind of compare it to other scriptures in the Bible and how it's used, and you can figure out what it meant. Well, she tried saying that because you don't know what this word means, you can't actually understand it. That's false, because like I just said, we can go into the Greek text, other texts, and figure out how they use that word and what it means, and we'll know exactly what it means. That, the idea of we don't know what a word means in the Bible because it's only used in one place in the Bible is kind of silly, because we can see that word used in other literature works and that kind of thing. And Tartarus is a really good example of that. Just kind of throwing that out as a side.
Now my thing is, okay, when Revelations later says that death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, what's that hell? Where they can sell that hell?
I think they use Gehenna for that.
They use what?
Gehenna, the word Gehenna, which is what Jesus uses in like the Gospels. When Jesus talks about it, he uses Gehenna.
Now what's that supposed to mean?
That's more like
that's
what is it, Sheol of the Old Testament? If anybody else familiar on that? I think that's more like Sheol of the Old Testament, where they describe hell. The gnashing of teeth and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of the traditional view of what we have of hell. This is just kind of to show you off to the side that it's talking about something unnormal here.
Well, when I've heard, now I'm going by, I've heard people have near-death experiences, and where they had trips to hell, and as a matter of fact, my niece is one of them. And she explained how it was when her experience, there are caverns, in other words, there are caverns in hell. So I'm wondering if what it is, the whole place is hell, but there are different compartments of it.
It's possible.
Well, you have up here, but then the angels were so, what they did to be chained under darkness, God put them under what humans were at.
Very possible.
Different levels. That's what I'm trying. Different levels.
Yeah.
And they were put at the lowest level. That sounds like it's just one big hell, but different levels.
Maybe. Whether it's kind of the same
Because it's
existing place, and it's just kind of the worst of the place, or whether it's a completely different places, and hey, this is right here, and this is over here. That's where the only thing that we have to really describe what that means is Greek literature, and it's just sort of like beneath hell. That's the best that we can really describe that. It's just a deep abyss beneath hell. Like I said, I can't remember what work it was. I don't think it was the Iliad or the Odyssey. It might have been the Odyssey. That describes however high it is from the ground to the heavens is how far Tartarus is beneath hell. That again is just a description from Greek literature on describing that. The main point of what I want to say though is that it's talking about something else other than the traditional, and that's the only place that's used here. But cast them down to Tartarus and delivered them into chains of darkness to be, and it says, reserved. And it also goes in to say, spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. So we see the angel that it's talking about, the angels, in comparison, alongside, right there, beside Noah. So we do see them put together there in description from Peter. It goes on to say, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an ensample unto those that should live godly, or that should live ungodly, and delivered just Lot, vexed with filthy conversation of the wicked. Now, with that being said, turn to Jude, and Jude brings another thing out about along those lines of thought. Jude says this. He says, this is the 6th verse, and the angels which the angels which kept not their first estate, some Bibles will say left their proper abode. The angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of them in like manner. So we are seeing now Sodom and Gomorrah again put in the same line of text with what these angels did. It's going to describe what Sodom and Gomorrah's problem was. What's it say? It says, giving themselves over to fornication, and what's it say after that? Going after strange flesh. Isn't that kind of an interesting description? Going after strange flesh. Are set forth an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. Likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Now, remember I've said before that I would never make a doctrinal stance on something that the Apocrypha said. But in the fact of it is an older writing that can have a bit of historicity to it. I would use it in a way to form an opinion on something that I didn't think was completely clear. Now I think the scriptures give me enough evidence that what we're talking about is we're talking about angels that mingled themselves with mankind, and they bred a different flesh. They bred some type of giant, some type of other being. Also, if you look into every kind of culture, a lot of them have examples of giants. A lot of them have examples of gods, of titans, those sort of things. The Greeks had it, the Romans had it. I feel like if a lot of those have it, there may be something to it. Now, we believe that the context of the Hebrew Bible is the one that's correct. But if there's those types of stories, they probably got there from somewhere. And I believe that could kind of be traced back to what the Bible refers to as in Genesis 6.
You brought that up. I was on my way to my dad's one time, and I was listening to a Christian channel, and there's a gentleman that does research in that department there, where in different countries they had found giants, bones of giants. They found graveyards of giants. I mean, they're huge. You're talking 12 to 15 feet at least, the bones. And they describe, like, you know, seen shows with Cyclops and all. That's what these giants look like. They actually had one eye. They were part of the Philistines, and they did roam the world because they actually had found the skeletons of them. And they believed, and they were mingled, because the angels in heaven are mighty. They're not wimps. We're talking mighty angels. They're big, because of testimony I've heard where people have seen the angels. And they're not little, they're huge. And so when they came down and mingled with man, well, you're going to have some statue there. That's where the giants came in. And so what they did, that evil came down. You know, they became evil, and that evil causes distortion. See? They were trying to ruin the bloodline so Christ couldn't come through. See, they was trying to mess up the perfect bloodline.
Yeah, and that's where you could go back to Genesis 3. I'll put enmity between thy seed and the woman's seed. And I was kind of going to get into that as well when we go on. If you look at what this is as the destruction of the seed of man, and that it was almost going to come to an end if God didn't stop it. At some point, it would have been completely and totally out of control, and if God hadn't stopped it.
Well, you know, if you can get a hold, I can't remember the man's name, if you can never get on the computer and do research, he has the history, the facts, where he had, you know, been investigating this. And they even have this stone table. They showed a table, a round, big old stone, where they sat and ate. Where these giants, and it's huge. And I often wonder, you know, if people go to the Stonehenge, they wonder how these stones got stood up. Well, look at the giants. They could have picked them up.
It's
and
very
put them up
possible.
there, yeah. So, I'm with you. I believe it came down. The Bible says they came down.
Yeah. So like kind of along the lines of the seed of men kind of being destroyed. If you look at where technology's going, I kind of brought this up, if you remember, a few weeks ago when I talked about technology and the role that it could possibly have on the end times. One of the weird things where it's just, I think stuff is going to get weird here before too long. It's actually, there's supposed to be an announcement, I think August 28th. Have you heard of Neuralink? It's Elon Musk's company, Neuralink.
Oh,
They
yeah.
take a little,
Yeah.
about a nickel or a quarter size hole in your skull,
Yeah.
and they're going to put basically, it has like a bunch of nodes on it, they put it into your brain, and it's supposed to be an interface between your brain and a computer.
He's got it in him.
And within a year, this was back in April, he said within the year we will be in human testing. This is Elon Musk. This isn't, I watched the man say it, it's not some type of weird conspiracy theory or anything like that. I watched it come out of his mouth. I've watched several places where he's talked about it. You can get on and see mainstream news talk about it. It's a thing. And they have a big announcement that's supposed to come on the 28th. We'll see what that is, but it's pretty wild.
I know I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but a long time ago, a lady named Mary Shelley had a similar dream.
Who's that, Mary Shelley?
She wrote Frankenstein.
Oh,
Well,
Frankenstein.
Frankenstein may be a foreshadow of what was coming.
Just want to put that in perspective.
but yeah, I mean, everybody, like a lot of people don't pay attention to. I have an interest in technical news and technology because with my degree and everything, I just kind of have an interest in that kind of stuff. People are underestimating artificial intelligence, and it's getting fast and it's getting quick, and they underestimate it.
But he's supposed to have it in his head.
I don't think he has it in his head.
He's supposed to. That's why I was. But you know.
But as far as straight from the horse's mouth, he said it would be in human testing within the year, and he even said that it was supposed to be to where at some point you could even like stream music, and there wouldn't be any sound. It would just be, you would hear the music, but it would be in your brain. And he seemed pretty bent on that this was going to happen. Again, this isn't conspiracy. I watched it straight from the horse's mouth. This mainstream news that you can look it up on, Google it. Neuralink is what it's called. It's also interesting to think about what that would have to play in the fact of languages. We have however many languages we have in the world right now. If you had that kind of capability to where you're able to play a song into your head and it's not actually making noise, it's just going through your head, then there is no reason to think that the way that we communicate with each other, with our different languages and everything, that wouldn't go to basically one language would basically rule them all. So that, even just looking at the Tower of Babel is kind of an interesting scenario. And again, I'm just telling you what the man has said. That's the guy that runs Tesla. That's the guy that's on putting spaceships into the air. That's the guy that's building electric cars. All of these things. He's a major voice in artificial intelligence, and he's the one saying these things, not me. Now, again, back where I was talking about the Apocrypha, I think the Bible shows enough evidence that, to me, I can accept the angel view of what they're talking about. But I want to go in the book of Enoch here, and just to read from Jude real quick. Jude says in his 14th verse, "And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000 of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of their ungodly deeds, which they have ungodly committed, and all of their hard speeches with ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So we know that Enoch had a book. We know that Jude was familiar with it. just to read a passage from the book of Enoch when it talks about this. It says in the 6th chapter of Enoch, "It came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children." And it goes on to say a few things about that. Chapter 8 says, "Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth, and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and coloring themselves." So you hear about the specific angel named Azazel that teaches men to do these things. It goes on to say, and I read this before, because there's kind of a similar language in Revelation where we were reading in 8 and 9, where or it was in 6, and Revelation 6 where it says, "How long will you basically let us suffer these terrible things?" Talking about people that have been persecuted, martyred. There's actually an interesting parallel here where it says that other angels came to God and they said, let me make sure I'm reading the right thing. They said to the Lord of the ages, "Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, and God of the ages, the throne of your glory stands unto all the generations of the ages, and your name holy and glorious, blessed unto all the ages. You have made all things, and the power over all things, and all things are naked and open in your sight. You see all things, and nothing can hide itself from you." And they go on to say, "You see what Azazel has done, who has taught all unrighteousness on the earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn." And it actually goes on to say, basically, how long are you going to put up with this? Also, where this talks about this is in the book of the Jubilees. In the book of Jubilees now again, this isn't something I'd make a doctrinal stance on, just reading from the Apocrypha alone. But in the book of Jubilees, in the 4th chapter, or maybe I'm reading from the wrong spot. I wrote it down. Oh, it's 5th. It's the 5th chapter. "And again it came to pass, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon, and they took themselves wives of all whom they chose, and they bare unto them sons, and they were giants. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, alike men and cattle and beasts and birds and everything that walks on the earth. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other, and lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of all men was evil continually." So, there's some references there. I referenced Josephus earlier, and I meant to bring my Josephus book and forgot, so I'll just read it to you from online. So, in Josephus and the Antiquity of the Jews, now again, this is more of a historical reference, kind of how they thought of this a long time ago, what was the thought process, what were their views on this, so we could get to what was the original view on this. And this is what he says. He says, in Antiquity of the Jews, it's the 3rd chapter, I think, here. "Now this posterity of Seth continued to esteem God as the Lord of the universe, and to have an entire regard to virtue for 7 generations. But in process of time they were perverted, and forsook the practices of their forefathers, and did neither pay these honors to God which were appointed to them, nor had any concern to do justice towards men. But for what degree of zeal they had formerly shown for virtue, they now show by their actions a double degree of wickedness, whereby they made God to be their enemy. For many angels of God accompanied with women, and begat sons that proved unjust, despisers of all that was good, on account of the confidence they had in their own strength. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those whom the Grecians called giants. But Noah was very uneasy at what they did, and being displeased at their conduct, persuaded them to change their dispositions and their actions for the better. But seeing they did not yield to him, but were slaves to their wicked pleasures, he was afraid they would kill him, together with his wife and children, and those they had married, so he departed out of the land. So when I look at this, and I think, what's the oldest view on this? What's the original view on this? Outside of looking at what I think is scripturally already factual, I have to go with the angel view over top of the other ones by far. Now the other thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned this to Matt the other day when he was here. An interesting thing about Azazel in the Bible is this. If you go to the Interlinear Bible and you go to Leviticus 16, if you turn to Leviticus 16 with me real quick, the 10th verse. Now what's interesting, now remember what I just said about Azazel in the book of Enoch. It says that Azazel is the one that taught us basically all evil, all the terrible things that we learned to do. Azazel was kind of responsible for it. This gets really interesting because if you look at Leviticus 16:10, it says, "But the goat on which the lot fell to be," and it says, "the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to make an atonement with him, and to let him go for a scapegoat into the wilderness." It says scapegoat, but if you look at the actual pronunciation of that in the literal translation, it says Azazel. So that's kind of an interesting thing as well. That's a side note that's free for your information. But I think that's pretty interesting.
What's Azazel supposed to mean?
What does it actually mean? Definition is entire removal is what this says. Origin from goat of departure, scapegoat is how it's used in the Bible. But it's used as scapegoat twice, for the scapegoat, and to be the scapegoat is how it's used in the Bible 4 times. So an interesting thing there. Again, not that I would make any doctrinal stances with the Apocrypha. It is certainly interesting that you read about Azazel being the one that taught men to sin, taught them basically how basically how to do war, how to do metals, all of those things. Taught women how to beautify themselves. As it was saying, like all these different things it was teaching mankind that weren't original. It kind of ascribes to him, and then when we read this in the Hebrew, it says Azazel is the scapegoat. So that's kind of interesting. But that is a look at the Nephilim, and why I think when we look at Revelation 8 and 9, especially 9, when we see the 5th trumpet being blown, that I think that we're talking about that abyss being opened up, and what's been trapped will be unleashed on mankind. And what was originally there before the days of Noah will be back with us again. Remember, Jesus said that as in the days of Noah, so shall it be as the Son of Man. It doesn't see it's going to be similar. It's going to be exactly like it. It's going to replay itself out. So that's how I come to the opinion of Revelation 8 and 9 there, especially with the 5th trumpet, that's what we're talking about. Again, it's people think otherwise. That's fine, but it was requested to do the Nephilim lesson again, so I went into that again, and I think it was beneficial too, so that way everybody could hear it, and then I'll post this online too. So, does anybody have anything else?
Yeah, I did some research on that too, and that's what the research I came across said basically the same thing. And it made sense. It really made sense. What they said is that the locusts were the demons. They were demons and attacking the demonic. The people that lived demonically on earth were being attacked by the same thing they lived by. It goes back to when Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, when he was talking about a man committing adultery with his father's wife. Okay, and what did he tell the church to do? he told him to deliver such a one to Satan,
Yeah.
okay, for the destruction of the flesh. So that his spirit can be saved. So it sounds like these people did wicked. Now they're going to be punished by the same deeds that they did to others.
Yeah.
By the demonic, you know? You understand what I'm
Yeah.
saying? The demons will come and attack them and give them a taste of their own medicine of what they did to others. And hope to it's just, you know, what did God say? They did not repent.
Yeah, it says that
Okay.
even after all of these things, they
They did not repent. So Paul was basically, it was the same thing in Corinthians. Turn him over to Satan, and let Satan deal with him, and hopefully he'll change. See, and that's what Paul, so I have to believe the same way. They're demons attacking. It's hope that they'll change their mind after they get a taste of what demonicness really is.
Yeah. Oh, looks like we ended good because the battery was about to die.